Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. The government's being urged to create a new ministerial portfolio to focus solely on organised crime. It's the number one threat to our national security, and as such, there should be a government minister put in charge of tackling it. And that's according to a report from experts advising the coalition. In recent years, there have been record busts at the border as global crime syndicates, including Mexican cartels and outlaw bikie gangs, have targeted New Zealand as a small but lucrative market. So why are we losing the fight against drugs and organised crime? And what can be done to give us a better shot at tackling the issue? Today on The Front Page, the advisory group's chairman and Meridith Connell criminal prosecutor Steve Symon is with us to discuss how New Zealand might appoint a Minister of Mafias. So, Steve, this Ministerial Advisory Group was appointed by Cabinet back in February to give government advice about how to overhaul the ways in which law enforcement and regulatory agencies can work together in this space. Tell me, how has that process been?
It's actually been quite an exciting process. I've been a Crown prosecutor at Meridith Connell for 20 years. And so during that time, I'd done some very serious cases for the police. And then I migrated to doing lots of serious cases for different government departments. And during that time, I saw a lot of frustrations that there were in the government agencies of, could we do more? And so it's actually been quite invigorating to be part of a group that's just there to find answers. And I've got a really good committee, really good crew. We have robust arguments, trying to get to the best outcome we can, and it's been really good so far. We are at this precipice where we've been doing these monthly reports, and we're about to finish our final report for September, and then it'll be in the hands of the government to see what they do with that. But we are hopeful because the support we've had indicates that the government is interested in being tough on crime, and particularly tough on organised crime. So we're hopeful that all of our hard work will pay off.
And what have some of those discussions been around? What are some of the themes over the last, nearly year?
Yeah, what we were asked to do was to say, look, organised crime is a big issue. And it's a big issue now already in New Zealand. But if we look even across to Australia and see where they're at now, they're kind of the ghost of Christmas future for us. We can see where it's going to go. And unfortunately, it's a pretty bad picture. Not through anything that New Zealanders are doing. It's just we are an environment where we've got a pretty good economy, and we are prepared to pay high prices for things like drugs. We are vulnerable to things like fraud. And so we're a risky market. And so what we've tried to do is in these monthly reports kind of break the subject up. And so our first report was trying to identify how bad the problem is. And so that for your listeners, your watchers, they could see what we mean when we say organised crime, not just guys riding around on motorbikes, but large or international, almost corporatised organised crime. Our next report in April looked at chasing the money. And so I'm very grateful that one of our committee members is Craig Hamilton, who is a former police officer who knows everything you need to know about organised crime in relation to money laundering and proceeds. He helped us with that. And then in May, we've looked at the role of corruption, that being a growing theme. We've looked at the community. We've looked at information sharing. And we're just about to reach this report, which is about accountability.
How bad is the problem? Can you quantify it?
Very good question. No, we can't. And the reason we can't is because part of our problem has been, although we've recognised organised crime as a problem for New Zealand and will get worse, our difficulty has been we don't really have metrics, right? So in the same way, I could tell you about the health system by how long it takes someone to get through accident emergency, or how well my kids are doing at school based on how their grading is and how that meets against national standards. we don't have the same kind of metrics in relation to organised crime. And what we see from international experiences, we really need to have that. We currently have our wastewater testing, which does not paint a good picture. We saw it spike last year and effectively double.
Yeah.
And it's doubled and it hasn't reduced, it's flatlined. And so we're now, it seems, consuming twice as much methamphetamine as we were last year, which is incredibly troubling. So what we see is we don't have enough metrics to know exactly how bad the problem is, except when you talk to enforcement agencies, they will tell you it's bad.
Well, police and customs routinely intercept massive amounts of drugs at the border. We're talking hundreds of kilos at the border. And I spoke to Herald senior reporter Jared Savage actually about this subject.
15 odd years ago, 1 kilo of meth was a big deal, and it was a front page story, and literally a front page story. And these days, even the smallest of drug dealers would have far more than a kilo in the back of the car. We're talking imports of 4, 5, 6, 700 kilograms.
Yeah, I'm showing my age, but I've been around as a prosecutor since some of the first intercepted drug cases. And we were talking, less than a kilogram of methamphetamine, whereas now on the bus we're talking about in the hundreds of kilograms of methamphetamine. And Jared Savage, to show his age, has also been around on those same cases. It's interesting. You look at his latest book, and it's interesting for me reading through it because it reads more like a yearbook than it does work of fiction. But what's troubling about that is these are all true cases. This is what is going on in New Zealand's environment, and we are seeing this real kind of narcos approach to organised crime in New Zealand.
We, as a government, we've done a lot of work around the public-facing stuff that people see, the gang patches, the sentencing, but this is what's in behind driving this crime trend that we need to get on top of, and the first part is building that public awareness. It's about a step change in the way we approach. We have always operated in silos in our enforcement agencies. We work cooperatively at a ground level. We haven't been very good at a high level allowing these levers to be pulled.
So in the report, the latest one, you said people across a range of sectors, industries and roles are working hard to play their part, but the system is not optimising their work in a way that it should. Tell me a bit more about that.
As a starter, we should say we've got good people in New Zealand. And it's one of the things you see when you go over and see other countries, see how they're struggling. And you come back and by and large, we've got really credible people. We've got hard-working, really passionate staff in our police force and all of our enforcement agencies. I've worked with a number of those people over the years. The difficulty that we've got is it's siloed, and so we'll have the police have got a huge variety of work to look at, from domestic violence through to organised crime, through fraud, through a variety of different sectors. So it's very hard for them to target the organised crime piece alone, even more so when they need to rely upon other agencies to help them. A good example is perhaps MB. MB is a large government organisation which has got multifaceted. Their core business objective for the last few years has been to be the easiest place in the world to do business, which is great. And we do want that because we want our economy to thrive. At the same time, our transnational organised crime strategy was to be the hardest place in the world for organised crime to do business. So you can see the tension for them in terms of how they play their role in supporting police and customs and other agencies to target organised crime. And so what we've said is, look, we need to, rather than have this split over a variety of different ministers, we need this to be brought under one organised crime minister. One minister who is responsible both to Cabinet for this response, but also to the public. So when your listeners, your watchers come and say, well, who can we look to for answers?
Where does the buck stop?
Where does the buck stop? We have one minister to answer that question, and then supported so that that minister can get answers and results from those different agencies. We still want the police to police. We still want customs to do their job. We still want MB to do their job. And we can say the same of all the agencies. We just need them to have some support to make sure that they're doing the best job they can, so that collectively as a team, we can be fighting organised crime.
And what might that ministry look like, and how might it operate?
Well, the first thing we've said is we want the minister to have responsibility for the transnational serious organised crime plan. So they're in charge of that.
Because there are about 13 agencies involved in that.
There's about 13 agencies, and you can play a good pub quiz game of trying to figure out exactly who they are. And even amongst them, there's some that are split. For an example, in MB, immigration has a really important role to play in terms of trying to address migrant exploitation. At the same time, they have the Companies Office, which is being exploited sometimes for money laundering and the like. So even within the ministries, there's split functions. And so you've got so many different people trying to respond to this. We're just trying to say, let's align all those views and put them in one place, and then support that minister with a small team that can help. We don't want to recommend an agency. We don't want to recommend a department. They're not trending anyway. But I don't want to... our committee didn't want to recommend something that means in a year's time there'll be an office with another set of staff doing another set of things. We wanted to see results straight away. So we've said there should be a small elite team that helps that minister and really helps energise the agencies to do their job as best as they can.
And I know that you've mentioned, nor is it holding to account those who are not meeting expectations. So who are we talking about there, and how do we hold people to account?
What we've seen is there are some agencies doing an incredible job. Police, customs are doing an incredible job. Other agencies are not doing as good a job. And so our point is to say we should be in supporting and encouraging the great work we've got. We should really be putting our resources behind helping those initiatives, helping those who are trying to do their best with organised crime. Similarly, we need to say if people are not coming to the party and doing as much as they can, we need to look at that and say, are we best to put our resources there, or should we give it to someone who will use it? But more fundamentally than that, what we've heard from these agencies is the guys at the front line are saying, it needs to be clear what you want us to do. And so what we've said is when we have this organised crime minister and have this secretarial support staff to help them, we need to help the agencies with like a work plan. And much the same you would have in a business working through what are our priorities, what are the things we can do. And so we want to create a shopping list for these agencies to say, what are all the things you could do to help the fight against organised crime, whether it's your agency's direct fight against crime or helping another agency. How can we provide you a list so you know what you've got to do? And then when we work through the course of a year, we can see whether you've done it or not.
And of course, this problem hasn't just popped up overnight or over the last couple of years. Hey, I saw that there was an example given about the Organised and Financial Crime Agency of New Zealand, and that was set up back in 2008. But that ended up being a little bit of a failure.
It started off well. It had some good people in it.
Good intentions.
It had great intentions. And was perhaps a symbol of how even at that stage, kind of when methamphetamine was just really kicking off in New Zealand, we saw the issue and we saw we needed to get on top of it. But it kind of fell apart. It fell apart through a lack of leadership, a lack of resources. And what that illustrates, the lessons there for us are one, to say, look, we've had a go at it then, it hasn't worked. What lessons can we learn from that now? What we know is we have to have very strong leadership. So whoever the minister is, if the government accepts our recommendation, whoever the minister is will need to be strong, will need to be bold. The support team that they have will need to be bold. And what we need to do is have follow through. They will need to have resources to help them achieve what they need to achieve, and we need to have them be accountable themselves. We're proposing things like this minister should stand in front of the government, stand in front of cabinet every year with a report explaining where we're at in our fight against organised crime. We've been doing these monthly reports where we're coming out, doing this, talking to the public, and we're saying we should have more of that. The public's desperate to know what we are doing in this fight against organised crime. We feel like they should know.
Well, because it is a fight that we are essentially losing at the moment.
We are. And that's not through lack of hard work and great energy. It's just that the problem that is coming to us from overseas is so significant. We're seeing the scale of drug production overseas is overwhelming now. Whereas we once saw small methamphetamine labs happening in New Zealand, we're seeing large-scale Uber labs happening in South America and in Asia. And those drugs are coming to New Zealand. We're seeing fraud not being some Nigerian prince calling you to ask you for your bank account, but large-scale schemes where they're using AI to try and develop profiles so they can trick you into providing details. So the scale and complexity we're seeing now of organised crime is growing, and New Zealand, like other countries around the world, is falling victim to that. And so we're saying we really need to take the fight to organised crime.
Have you had any response from the government thus far?
The response so far has been really positive. I have to say, Minister Costello, who is the Minister for Customs, Associate Minister for Police, she's a former police officer. And so when she was setting up our ministerial advisory group, she was very clear to us to be bold. She was very clear to us that's not just rhetoric. She has, through her time during the police and then her time as a private investigator, seen how there's lots of promises are made but not much follow through. And so for us, her point was, you need to be very clear and come up with bold initiatives and then leave it for the government to push those through and see if we can support those. I've had great meetings with Minister Mitchell. I've had great meetings with Minister Goldsmith. I'm working my way around a number of the other ministers. They care. And what has been really interesting for me is to see the passion with which they want to confront this problem. And what we're trying to do is create an opportunity to say, in our September paper, we will have the solution. And what we're looking for is government getting behind that.
Well, nothing gets more bold, I think, than suggesting another ministerial portfolio. Hey, what do you reckon the chances are by, say, this time next year, we will have a mafia minister or something, so to speak?
I'm optimistic, and I think we could do variations of that. You could do lesser degrees of that. You could take one of the existing portfolios, like the police, like the Ministry of Justice, and add on to those. But that would be ignoring the problem we see, which is we need one place to come to so we know who's accountable for this. And don't get me wrong, that will be a big task for that minister. There will be big issues for them to face now and in the future. And that's why it's going to have to be someone who's pretty robust.
Do you see that responsibility lying upon someone like the police minister? Because I know that, in cabinet reshuffles past, oftentimes ministers do get multiple portfolios, sometimes ones that interconnect with each other. How important is it to keep the police minister and, say, a minister for organised crime separate?
I don't think that matters too much, as long as the minister who takes hold of this portfolio is bold, and as long as that minister understands the nature of the organised crime problem and is aware of what's happening overseas so they can see where it's trending as well, and so that we can make sure that we resource it properly. You'll oftentimes see ministers hold a number of different portfolios. What we need now is someone bold.
Thanks for joining us, Steve.
You're welcome. Welcome.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who's also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.